afternoon. If I told you there is a person who attended a women's march in January and openly declared his vision for gender equality, who would you envision him to be? In my mind, I pictured an activist who marches on the streets and campaigns for gender equality, or a feminist who speaks eloquently on the grave consequences of sexism. But the person happened to be the last person I'd think of: Harvey Weinstein. This former filmmaker is also a convicted sex offender, with over 80+ women who came out with sexual assault allegations against him. They detailed their traumatic experiences, which sparked the famous #MeToo movement. It is clear that our apparent personas don't necessarily match the substance of our actions. So how can we tell good from bad then? How can we identify these facades that shield malintention? While I was trying to answer these questions, I realized that the truth is significantly more complicated. Because unlike stories and movies that portray characters and humans to be protagonists or antagonists, these dichotomies of pure embodiments of good or evil were much more nuanced. So what is the answer then? How can we actually resolve this contradiction? I speculated some more possibilities. What if good personas are not always intentionally presented? What if this disparity between good and evil exists to an extent in all of us? What if being good is what makes us bad sometimes? To reconcile these inconsistencies in our behavior, it is important to understand a concept called moral licensing. Essentially, moral licensing is the human tendency to justify bad decisions with a preceding good one. In other words, it is the luring voice inside our head after a workout that tells us, look, you've tried hard, and now you're justified to reach into the fridge for your pint of ice cream. And moral licensing only works because it leverages how our self-image works. Our self-image is how we'd like to present ourselves to the world. Just think about the adjectives you'd want others to describe you with: kind, friendly, optimistic, funny, and then you'd get a sense of what your self-image is. The interesting thing with our self-image is that it doesn't seek perfection in terms of upholding it. We don't need to reflect these traits 100% of the times. What our minds want is to overall, in general, represent this trait, and therefore we'd feel comfortable and confident with regards to our reputation and image. So to account for these fluctuations or inconsistencies in behavior, our mind becomes our own accountant, keeping track of the positive and negative actions we do. When we do something good, we add some positive credit into our moral bank accounts, which we can later cash out by doing something less morally desirable. And all of this is done with the consideration that we just can't go into debt. We want to maintain a positive balance. And when the positive balance grows, we'd feel more comfortable taking some morally less desirable actions and cashing things out. And this is the quid pro quo mindset that enables moral licensing, the action of converting our own behavior into plus ones and minus ones that eventually can balance out to net zero. And we've all seen the consequences of this tendency. For me, after an hour of work, I will tell myself I've worked hard and now I deserve some relaxation. Except 2 hours later, I'm on the 2nd season of Suits and my to-do list still remains entirely unchecked. And the researchers at Baruch College in New York proved just how habit-wrecking moral licensing is. They conducted an experiment in a mock fast food restaurant where participants handed out 2 versions of the menu to usual customers at the restaurant. One with your usual standard fast food options and the other with healthier alternatives as well, like salads. Surprisingly, the group that got the healthier menu more often than not chose the least healthy item on the menu. And this can be explained with moral licensing as well. Just thinking and considering making the healthier decision makes us feel complacent because we feel like we're responsible, we are healthy, and therefore we can responsibly indulge in some junk food as well. But here's the thing. If simply thinking about making a good decision adds to our moral bank account, then isn't it so easy to feel this complacency? Think about how often our brains could trick us into feeling this manufactured confidence. And moral licensing plays a role in social issues and moral dilemmas as well. In a study conducted by Northwestern University, participants were divided into two groups. One were asked to write about themselves using positive adjectives, and the other group wrote about themselves using neutral adjectives. Then both groups were presented with an opportunity to help someone else. And the group that wrote about themselves positively felt more comfortable rejecting that request. And this is for the same reason, because that action of writing about yourself and complimenting yourself built up your confidence about your self-image and enhanced this perception that we are recognized as being compassionate and positive, and therefore reduces the urgency for us to say we must act now with empathy and to help other people. And just writing did that. So think about how many times we've done this without even knowing. And when moral licensing plays a role in activism, that's where immense problems arise. First of all, progress becomes extremely susceptible to rebounds. In Australia, after they elected their first ever female Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, ad hominem misogynistic attacks flooded politics. Columnists would attack her for exposing her cleavage or cutting her hair. Opposition protested in the streets with placards that read, "Ditch the witch." And companies made a dog toy named the Julia doll that grotesquely exaggerated and ridiculed her for having feminine features. And this backlash is rooted in moral licensing as well, because those with some conservative beliefs observe how the society has been a force forward, observe monumental progress and change being made, and they themselves feel like a part of this force. They feel like the progress and their contribution justifies the maintenance and expression of some more conservative beliefs. They see how society is perceiving each other and feel confident that they're also known as warriors who fight for justice and equality, and therefore there's a reduced sensitivity to check themselves and self-examine as to whether or not they have certain prejudice and tendencies that they should be addressing. And all of this resulting backlash that undermines the very progress that has been used to justify it all. The second problem that arises in activism is the fact that social media in this day and age offers us an easier way out, which is the simple, tokenistic gesture we can take to enhance our self-image without truly and tangibly contributing to the cause. And this is everywhere. Just think about how easy it is for us to post a black screen for a hashtag Blackout Tuesday, or retweet the LGBTQ scene in the newest Star Wars movie. But all of these things detract away from the urgency to do something more meaningful, like, for instance, holding our political representatives accountable to making legislative changes that address historic injustice, or making sure that we amend the hiring practices where we are working, making sure that the hiring process is equitable and fair. And the reduced urgency is stemmed in the very fact that we fall for these easier options to declare ourselves to be compassionate and woke. I'm sure you all remember the ALS Ice Bucket challenge. It went viral everywhere, including on the SAS campus. But while this challenge raised great awareness for the cause, according to Will Ormuse's research with the National Post, most participants spent more money on bagged ice to get the perfect shot than what they actually donated. When famous TV personalities like Martha Stewart completed a challenge, she could have reached a wide audience, but she failed to even mention the cause of why there is an ice bucket challenge in the first place. And this is because social media made it about the spectacle, about the visibility, and about the publicity. That it has been about the fun and the hype, not about the true issue that is at hand. And when people feel like they've devoted time and energy and social capital to filming this challenge and putting it on the internet, they feel like they've done their part in forwarding this campaign. And therefore, they feel like they're entitled to not donating, even though their monetary donation would have more directly benefited a patient struggling with ALS. And there are even more examples. Christofferson's research in the Science Journal with the University of British Columbia proved how if you liked the Save Darfur Facebook page, you're less likely to donate to the foundation if the foundation approached you in the streets. Classmates who post about feminism more frequently are more reluctant to step up and help their female classmates in need. All of these are potential positive changes that could have been made, replaced by tokenistic gestures because social media gave us an easier alternative. So the most important question to answer becomes, how can we address and combat moral licensing? I want to introduce to you a 3-step thought process that I would encourage you to go through every time you make a decision about activism. First, don't label actions as good or bad, because good or bad are absolute adjectives that makes it really easy to convert our behavior into +1s and -1s. And that is exactly the foundation of the quid pro quo mindset that feeds into moral licensing. You should connect your actions to end goals instead. Instead of saying being green makes me a good person, say being green and looking at my carbon footprint makes me a person who can build a world that is safer for myself and my loved ones. Instead of saying fostering gender equality in the workplace is honorable, say helping my female coworkers ensure I build this workplace that I would like to reside in, which is one of mutual respect and of gender equality. These statements leverage your ideals, worldview, and objectives to propel you to take necessary actions without enabling the quid pro quo mindset that feeds and predicates complacency. Second, focus on now. Make choices in a vacuum and force yourself to isolate this choice as it is and not think about your past experiences or contributions or connections to a cause. Because when you consider these past experiences, these are all distracting factors that takes you away from evaluating this choice in a vacuum. When we think about a choice on its own, like helping a classmate who is experiencing bullying, objectively that is the right thing to do. And we would more likely reach this responsible conclusion if we're not distracted by other thoughts like what we've done in the past. Lastly, do private, not social acts of kindness. Because here's the thing, when it's in the public, when it's on our social media outlets, when it's to the world, we're inevitably going to be distracted by perception management, thinking about how we can uphold our reputation, thinking about how we would like to present ourselves. And that is where our minds can drive us into equivocating the most public action to the most meaningful one. Instead, build your personal connection to a cause. Carry a secret poppy with you to remind yourself to commemorate the veterans that are meaningful in your life. Or keep a log in your journal to document your carbon footprint and the quantity of times you carpooled in the past week. Consistently doing these things builds up your personal resonance with the cause through repeated reinforcement and repeated action in the face of this issue. But it doesn't make it all about the spectacle, about the publicity and the visibility, exactly because it is something you're doing with yourself. As I've learned, there are no antagonists or antagonists in this world or in this room. We're not binaries of pure embodiments of good or evil because we're people. People with infinite potential to do good and change the world, and also the ability to undermine progress and to make the world worse when we are careless. And this is a world where there's immense inequality and injustice. So it will take all of our voices to change it for the better. And step one is for us to commit together that we're going to combat the luring voice inside our head, the voice that tells us you've been good enough and you can take a break now. Thank you.